Now, you guys know that I love piping buttercream swirls, and a really popular effect at the moment is quite a thick modern rosette on the top of cupcakes. Now, it can sometimes be tricky to know which piping tip that you need to use to create which effect. So in this week's video tutorial, I'm going to be using 5 different piping tips and showing you the effects that they create. Now, in this video, I'm also going to be using 3 different colours of buttercream and showing how you can add them all together to pipe some really pretty swirls. Okay, let's get started. So in order to pipe my cupcakes, first of all, I've got some vanilla cupcakes. So I've just baked my vanilla cupcake recipe in these white cases, and I will leave a link to my recipe in the description below. I've got some piping bags and also the piping tips that I'm going to be using, which I will run through as we go. Now, for the buttercream, I'm using my American buttercream, and I will also put a link to this in the description below. Now, when you pipe your cupcakes, you could just use one colour. I'm actually going to use a variety of 3 colours. To colour these, I've just been using the Colour Splash in Raspberry. Now, in order to add the 3 different colours into my piping bag, I'm going to be using some cling film. It's a great way to get an even distribution of the colours into your piping bag. If you were using one colour, you would just want to put this straight into the piping bags as you normally would. But what I'm going to do is take some of my buttercream and create 3 different rows. Just try and keep them quite straight. You could pipe the different colours of buttercream into rows, but this just saves using a lot of excess piping bags. And I'm using 3 colours, but you can use as many as you like. I'm then going to take my cling film and just holding one of the ends, you just want to pull that round, and we want to create a sausage shape. So we want it to meet the colour on the other side, and then just twist the ends. Once you've got that ready, it's now time to prepare my piping bag. Now, the first piping tip that I'm going to be using is the 1B. Now, this is a closed star piping tip and is very similar in style to the 2D. It's just a lot bigger. So if you're familiar with the 2D, which you would usually use to do a normal classic rosette, you can see the difference in size, especially at the top. So this is going to give us a larger version of that classic rosette swirl. So I'm going to pop this into my piping bag, just snipping off the end, popping it in that piping tip and just pulling it tight. I can then take that buttercream sausage, and on one end I'm going to snip off that cling film, push this into my piping bag. Okay, so taking my cupcake, we want to create a rosette swirl. So for this, we're going to be starting in the center. So I'm going to hold my piping bag at a 90-degree angle just above the center of my cupcake. Apply pressure to the piping bag to create a star in the center of our cupcake. Once it's reached a diameter of about 1 inch, bring that piping bag around as if I was drawing a small circle in the middle. Once I get back to where I started, I want to bring my piping bag out slightly and do 1 rotation around the edge of my cupcake. Once I get back to where I started, I want to bring that piping bag so it just comes on top of my previous swirl, stop applying pressure and pull away. So as you can see, we've just got this quite chunky rosette swirl. Now, you can either leave your cupcakes like this. I'm going to finish mine off with some sprinkles just where that tail comes around. So I'm going to be using these sprinkles by Happy Sprinkles, and this is called Princess Diary. So we've got different shades of pink and white sprinkles and also some gold. So there we've got this really pretty buttercream swirl using the 1B piping tip. The next piping tip I'm going to be using is the 1C. Now, it's a very similar style, so we have this closed star tip at the top, but instead of having 6 cutouts, we actually have 8. So this is going to give us more of a textured swirl. So again, I'm going to pop this into my piping bag with some of my pink buttercream. I'm going to pipe this one in exactly the same way. So again, holding that piping bag at a 90-degree angle to the cupcake, letting some of that buttercream come out, wrap it round before coming back on top of the previous one, releasing pressure and just pulling away. So there we have the swirl with the 1C. Now, just as I did on the previous one, I'm going to finish this off with some of those really pretty sprinkles. For the third piping tip, I've got the 1E. Now again, this is a very similar piping tip, but it has a lot more teeth cut out. So this is going to give us a lot more texture on our cupcake. Now, one thing that I did want to mention is choosing your piping tips. Now, so many different brands sell piping tips now, and sometimes you might find that even though the numbers are the same, there's a slight variation. So if I bring in this piping tip, this one is exactly the same number, but this one is slightly more curved over at the top. So the teeth are actually the same size, it just has a slightly smaller center where there's more of a curvature. You're going to get a very similar effect with both of these, but I just wanted you to be aware that they can sometimes look slightly different from brand to brand. So again, I'm creating exactly the same kind of swirl. So there we have the swirl that we've created with the 1E. Now on this one you can see there is so much texture, and the thing that I love when you pipe this one is all those different sides on that buttercream swirl just start to lay flat and curve over slightly, and this gives a really unique look to this rosette. For my fourth piping tip, I'm using the 1F. Now this one is slightly different to the others. So instead of just having V's that are cut out, the cutouts on this one actually have double points. So it resembles a little bit like a snowflake. So there we have the buttercream swirl with the 1F. This is a very similar effect to the others, but instead of having all of that texture really close together, for every two we then have this slight gap. So it just creates a slightly different effect. Now I will put links to all the piping tips that I've used and all the tools that I've used throughout today's video, along with a discount code for the Happy Sprinkles, and I'll pop this in the description below. The last piping tip that I'm going to be using is the 1G. Now this is very similar to the others in that we have these V's cut out. If I bring in the 1C, this one actually had 8 little cutouts. The 1E had 12 and this one has 10. One thing that I do notice on this one is when you hold the piping tips together, the actual cutout comes slightly further down the piping tip than some of the others. So there we've got our buttercream swirl with our 1G. So if I bring back in my cupcake where we used the 1C piping tip, you can see that it's got a lot more texture and it's starting to fold over just like on the 1E. Now the difference with the 1E is because the cutouts didn't go as far down into my piping tip, it doesn't actually curve over as much. So if I bring all 5 of my cupcakes back in so we can compare them against each other, the first cupcake that we have is using the 1B. The next one was the 1C. And I really love how this one looks. We get a little bit more texture on the cupcake, but it still has that classic rosette swirl look to it. The next one was the 1E. This one actually had a lot of teeth cut out and they were quite shallow. So this meant that we had quite a lot of texture on the top of our cupcake. The next one we used was the 1F, and this one had the double cutouts. And lastly we had the 1G. So this had 10 different teeth cut out and they actually came down the piping tip quite a lot. This gave this really pretty effect. Now if I was to pick my favorites, I do think it would be between the 1C and also the 1G, but please do let me know in the comments below which one out of these 5 is your favorite. Is there one that you tend to pipe a lot on your cupcakes, or from watching this video, is there one that you really want to try? I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and you'll find it useful if you want to pipe these large rosettes on the top of your cupcakes. If you have enjoyed the video, as always, don't forget to give it a like. And if you'd like to see more videos like this and you haven't already, then don't forget to subscribe to the Cakes by Ninja YouTube channel. Now, I do have quite a few different tutorials showing different piping tips and the effects that you can create on the top of your cupcakes. So I will put links to these in the description below if you are looking for some new styles of buttercream swirl. So until next time, bye!